Welcome to the Explainer. So, today we're digging into a really fascinating claim coming from the geopolitical channel Khamsina Economy. They're arguing that Egypt isn't just reacting to events anymore. Instead, they're quietly playing a much bigger game, a grand strategy, really, to put themselves back at the very top of the Middle East power structure.
And get this, the channel makes a pretty provocative comparison. They say the Egyptian president is basically recreating the playbook of President Anwar Sadat. We're not talking about military might here, but something way more subtle, winning through clever diplomacy and serious economic leverage. All right, so to really unpack this theory, we're going to look at 5 key pieces of the puzzle they've laid out. First, Egypt's new strategic game. Then, how they're supposedly using energy as a weapon. After that, we'll get into a surprising alliance with China, then look at their moves to redraw regional influence, and finally ask the big question: is Egypt becoming the new power broker? Okay, so the core argument here is that all these recent events that seem totally unrelated, a gas deal here, a military partnership there, they're not random at all. According to this analysis, every single one is a calculated piece on a much larger chessboard, all designed to push Egypt right back to the top. So let's jump into the first piece, energy, and specifically a huge gas deal with Israel that the source calls an incredibly audacious move. Now, on the surface, this just looks like Egypt buying gas, right? Simple. But this analysis claims it's something else entirely, a masterstroke of economic and political leverage. And we are talking about a massive deal here. $35 billion, locking in gas supplies all the way to 2040. So you can see why the source says this isn't just some everyday business transaction. They're arguing it's a foundational piece of this whole grand strategy. Okay, now this is where it gets really interesting. According to the source's claims, look at these terms. They say Egypt locked in a price of around $7.50 to $8, while the market rate could be double that, like $12 to $16. So not only do they get long-term energy security, but they could potentially turn around and resell liquefied natural gas for a massive profit. It's a huge economic win if this is accurate. And this is really the core of the argument right here. The public view might be, oh, Egypt is now dependent on Israel for gas. But the source completely flips that on its head. They argue that this deal actually gives Egypt the leverage. It becomes a political tool, and at the same time, it helps drain Israel's own reserves, which, could shift the whole energy balance in the long run. Right, so the obvious question is, why on earth would Israel agree to a deal like this, one that seems to give Egypt the upper hand? Well, the source has a theory. They speculate that Israel was actually gambling on the deal being super unpopular inside Egypt, maybe even sparking some internal dissent that could weaken the government. A pretty risky bet, if you ask me. Okay, but the strategy laid out in this analysis doesn't just stop with energy. The next major pillar they point to is something pretty stunning, a supposed military partnership with China that is way, way beyond just buying some weapons off the shelf. Now, according to an Israeli intelligence report that the source cites, China isn't just selling Egypt weapons, they're allegedly transferring the entire manufacturing capability for some of their most advanced tech. We're talking hypersonic missiles, sophisticated drones, fighter jet production lines, all to be built right there in Egypt. So again, you have to ask, why? Why would China share its crown jewels, its most advanced military tech? Well, the analysis suggests this is much bigger than just beefing up Egypt's military. It's about something much more strategic for China's global ambitions. And here's the alleged plan. Egypt becomes a key manufacturing partner. They'd build this hardware not only for their own army, but also to help China fulfill its sales orders around the world, maybe even to countries in Europe. I mean, think about that. That would completely rewrite the military balance of power in the region. A total game changer. All right, so we've got energy and military tech. But there's a third piece to this puzzle. According to the source, diplomacy. They point to a series of really clever diplomatic plays that are all about making Egypt the one country you have to talk to solve the region's biggest problems. And the source connects some interesting dots here. You've got high-level talks with Morocco, apparently linked to a major economic deal. Then there's Sudan, where the source claims European powers have basically given Egypt the green light to step in and stabilize things. And of course, in Gaza, Egypt is leading a peace plan that's backed by the US. The pattern here? In every major flashpoint, Cairo is positioning itself as absolutely essential. And if we zoom in on the post-war Gaza plan they're proposing, it looks really methodical. Step 1, get the US on board. Step 2, demand a full Israeli withdrawal from key areas. Step 3, bring in international forces. And what's the ultimate goal?
to secure a permanent seat for Egypt on the council that manages Gaza's future, effectively putting them in a central role. And this is a really key point the source makes. Egypt's very firm, very public refusal to allow any displacement of Palestinians wasn't just a moral stance, it was a brilliant political move. It gave them the moral high ground and basically forced the international community to come to them and take their framework seriously. So let's pull all these threads together. What does this all add up to? Well, when you connect the dots, the energy deal, the Chinese military tech, the diplomatic maneuvering, the picture that emerges, according to this analysis, is of a nation systematically transforming itself. No longer just a regional player, but a true power broker. And you can see it broken down here. The source argues Egypt is building its new power on these four main pillars. You've got the energy leverage from that gas deal. You've got military and tech independence, thanks to that alleged partnership with China. Then there's diplomatic centrality, making sure they're at the table for every big discussion. And finally, tying it all together with these big economic partnerships.
And I think this quote from the source really sums up the whole philosophy they're describing. I win on the ground without entering any conflicts. This is politics. It's all about achieving your goals through smart political and economic moves, not through war.
So, why does any of this matter to you? Well, if this narrative is even partially right, it means we could be watching a massive shift in the Middle East's power dynamics. Egypt would be moving from being a reactive player to a really proactive one, fundamentally changing who calls the shots in the region. And ultimately, the source leaves us with a really big question to chew on. Is Egypt actually pulling this off? Are they successfully reshaping the balance of power in the Middle East? This analysis suggests that what we're seeing right now might just be the opening moves in a very, very long game.